Ladies and gentlemen, I think I finally ruined this garden patch right here. Take a look. We have been planting tomatoes here for the last few years. 2 years ago, the crop did not do well. The plants barely grew. Last year, the crop failed entirely, and that is because we insisted on planting tomatoes here in this patch year after year after year. You're seeing the result of a fallow field that we ruined because we didn't do crop rotation, pretty much. Crop rotation is you plant tomatoes one year, rhubarb the next year, kale the year after that, and then you go back to tomatoes. Something like that. You rotate your crop year after year. So the plants have a chance to, different plants have a chance to grow into the garden bed. Because if there's something a plant hates, like a tomato plant, if it's something that it hates the dead roots of its ancestors. So if we took to plant tomatoes last year, those plants grew and then they died. And then we planted tomatoes again this year. Those new tomato plants are growing in the roots of last year's dead plants. And most plants hate that. It's like if you move to the cemetery and you live there and you sleep in a grave. Kind of like that. Imagine that. Some crazy, freaky people actually might like that. And in the plant world, some plants actually don't mind that. Like grasses, for example, or some weeds don't mind that. But most plants don't like it at all. So imagine many years of built up dead roots of tomato plants in this garden patch. In addition, what we did, which is probably equally as damaging, is we would go every year. This was back in the days where we didn't know any better. We would go and get steer manure, chicken manure, all this fancy stuff that you see in those brightly colored bags at the big box store. We would get that, bring it into this garden patch right here. We'd bring it into this garden patch and we would mix it into the soil. We thought that manure was soil back then. And we thought like, oh, tomatoes love it. And you know, tomatoes actually do love that stuff. But there's a big distinction about where to place that manure. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? I'll talk about it in this video. But for now, I'm going to try to save this garden patch because it's important. We don't have a lot of space out here in Southern California, Zone 10. And we need to use this spot, okay? Plants are now starting to hate this spot. Let me show you an example. Look at this rhubarb plant. We planted it here recently. It's not doing well. It's barely growing. It's kind of like rotted out here in the center part. And this is a sad looking little rhubarb plant. This is what plants look like now planted here in this garden patch nowadays because the soil is kind of messed up. I should have listened to my neighbor Fred, who lived over there, and he passed away. Rest in peace. He was an old man back when we knew him. He had been gardening in this area of Southern California for decades, and he said he would see us going to the big box store and getting those soils, and he would tell us, guys, what are you doing? Don't change the soil. Don't add anything to the soil. This soil is great. And he was right. The more and more I learned about soil, the more and more I learned about what good soil is, I realized that my poor neighbor Fred, rest in peace, was smart and he was right and we were wrong. We thought Fred was wrong. This is some of the best soil. The native soil here is some of the best soil I've worked with anywhere. I've planted trees all over Southern California and the soil in this spot is some of the best. Doesn't need any amendment, doesn't need anything. It does need amendment, but again, the placement is key and I'm going to talk about that. But this is some of the best native soil I've worked with because it's just dirt. It's just crushed up earth, sand, a little bit of clay. It's excellent. It's fantastic. So I'm going to attempt to revitalize this little patch. I'm going to try to bring it back by doing some things. And I'm going to show you now. Let's get started. Let's go. Guys, here's some of the dead roots of past plants I was talking about. They're all over this garden patch. At this point, it's kind of impossible to take out all these dead roots. But I'll try. I'll try my best to remove as much of the dead roots as I can. And what you just saw me put down there, if you have been following my channel for maybe the last year or two, I think you can guess what I just put in this garden patch. And it's my old friend, my trusted friend, decomposed granite, DG as it's known for short. I've already put 6 bags of DG here in this garden patch, which is about, this garden patch is, I'm going to say 10 to 12 feet by 4 feet wide. I put 6 of those 50-pound bags of DG already. I think I'm going to put 2 or 3 or 4 more. And I'm going to mix it into the soil because DG is purely mineral soil. It's such a friendly, neutral soil that it's so versatile. It's multifaceted, has a lot of uses. But in this case, for this garden bed, it's just going to provide a nice neutral soil, something that plants have been growing in for millions and millions and millions of years. It's something that plants are comfortable growing in, including tomatoes and other vegetables. It's not going to rot plants out. It's not going to cause problems for plants. And it's just something that works. Okay, so let me show you how I mix it in. I'm going to try to mix it in so that way the next year's vegetables could move out of the cemetery that they're living in, and they could move into a slightly better neighborhood, probably across the street from a cemetery or down the block from a cemetery. Think of it that way. We're going to use that cemetery analogy. I see some more dead roots here. Oh, look at this. More dead roots from past crops. Okay guys, you just saw me mix a bunch of DG into here. I made sure to get the DG in the top foot of soil. I don't need to go deeper than about a foot. Why is that? Well, most vegetables, most fruits in fact too, most fruit trees, you'd be surprised how shallow their roots are. Most vegetables and fruit trees, their roots don't go that deep. Most of their root system are within the 1 foot of soil because the roots need oxygen to breathe, and they can access the most oxygen the closer to the soil, the surface that they are. So they don't need to go that deep, okay? So I mixed in DG, whereas in the past I would do the exact same with steer manure. Now you're asking, what's the difference? What's wrong with steer manure and chicken manure for vegetables? And that's a great question. And it's great. Plants love steer manure. They love chicken manure. But they hate it when the roots are touching, their roots are touching that stuff. Because as you start watering your plants, your vegetables and your fruits, you start watering it, and the roots are touching steer manure or any other organic matter. It could be anything. Bat guano, what's the other popular organic matter? Bat guano, all that fancy stuff that you could find online or at the big box store. That stuff, as water is added, it starts to rot. And as it rots, it steals oxygen from the roots, that oxygen that the roots need. The roots can't breathe, and the plant suffers, and then it starts to decline, and then it starts to die. And this is a long-term thing, because you can get away with 1 season of planting vegetables in pretty bad soil. You can go to the big box store and plant your plants in those brightly colored bags of soil, and they might look good for about a year. But then we're thinking long-term here, all right? Most people think short, but as gardeners, we want to think long-term, many years in the future. Over the few years, long-term, it's not a good idea. Plants are going to start to suffer, especially plants that can live for more than 1 year. Like for us here in Southern California, a lot of our vegetables are perennials, like chilies, for example, can be grown not for one season. They can be grown long term. So we have to think a little bit longer term for our plants. So that's why we're going to use something mineral, something stable that plants are just used to growing in for many, many years. And that's the big distinction. I hope I made that clear. Okay, I've only tried this method with fruit trees only. So with vegetables, I'm new. This is an experiment. I'm trying this. I don't have any expectations. And this is just the beginning. This is only April. We could start planting our vegetables here starting February, but we're starting here in April. This is spring. Plants are starting to grow, things are starting to flower, and we're going to start planting vegetables here. And I'm going to show you the progress as the season progresses. We're only here in April, and so you'll see how these plants perform in this garden patch with this experiment that I'm doing by adding DG into here as an effort to save this garden patch. So of course you'll see the results, and to see the results you got to subscribe. So subscribe, then give me a like, leave me a comment, let me know how your plants are going. And as always, thank you for watching. Bye bye. I almost forgot to give a shout out to my main man, Gary Matsuoka of Laguna Hills Nursery. He taught me all this stuff, and now I'm sharing it with you. So shout out to Gary Matsuoka. Thank you.